Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh Vissa with Adam Schroeder. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. Today we have Christopher Rosow on the show. He's the New York Times bestselling author of Threat Bias, Ben Porter series, book 2, and the new book, Subversive Addiction, Ben Porter series, book 3. This is a part of our episodes on creativity and writing. So without further ado, Christopher Rosow, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Well, it's terrific to be here. Thank you both for having me on your show. Thank you for thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's get started. Let's start the discussion on your journey. How did Christopher Rosow become a New York Times bestselling author? Is this a dream that you had growing up, or did you have a full-time job before and you got tired of it, quit, and said, I'm just going to write? Walk us through that.
Well, how long do we have? So, no, it was never a dream. It was almost accidental. It was accidental. I used to run, or I still do run part of, I still have a day job as well as being a writer. I ran a design build construction firm, which I started from home probably 15 years ago, and grew into a substantial construction company, but realized that what I was doing was kind of spending all of my time feeding the machine, just basically looking for work to cover the overhead, to cover the equipment costs, the people costs, all the stuff that he had to do to run a construction company. And I scaled it back in 2018, at the end of 2018, and I found time to pick up this story that I'd started writing in the fall of 2017. Which became the first book, my first book called False Assurances. And when I closed the construction side of my business, I started selling office assets. At that time, I was working from a shop that I bought and working out of the house, and went back to working from home. And I found this time to focus on the design business, which I love, the creative part of construction. But I also figured I would pick up writing this book, which I, like I said, had started writing about a year prior to, and it all became very, very accidental. So it was never really a dream, but it was more a question of perseverance and maybe stubbornness to kind of finish this project, and then it got legs, and here we are, and I've got 3 books out.
I was reading up about you, and you talk about how with your first book, you were pitching it and thinking, this is a great story. People are going to love it. You're pitching it, and you kept getting turned away. But then you decided to do 2 things, and I'm curious about both of them. Number one, you decided to self-publish. So what made you think it's getting rejected, but I'll self-publish and it'll do well? And number 2, you automatically started writing a second one before you'd gotten the first one published. What made you think, I'm just going to keep going, turn this into a series?
Well, again, it's a great question, Adam. So it's funny. When I started False Assurances, it was originally called the Ben Porter, was just the name of the book, and Ben Porter is the name of my protagonist. The first manuscript I sent as kind of a share thing to my father. My father and I share an interest in sort of this thriller genre. We've talked about books all our lives, and he currently lives in Florida. I'm up in Connecticut. I sent him this thing via email. I said, hey, I wrote this story. I thought you'd be interested, and by the way, I'm going back to my day job. And he said, he read it. He said, this is great. I really enjoyed it. And I'm not just saying that as your father, because of course, it's hard to be unbiased. So he said, can I share it with a couple of my friends and see what they think? And I said, sure, why not? So about, 2-3 weeks later, he called me back and he said, I showed it to Jim Patterson. He loved it. He wants to talk to you. And I said, who's Jim Patterson? And there's this sort of long kind of pregnant pause on the line, and this voice comes back, maybe a little bit of scorn. He's like, James Patterson, he's one of the world's best-selling authors. You don't know who he is? And I said, oh, James Patterson. And no, we called him Jim. So that was the beginning. And that was like transformational in the journey, is to get somebody like Jim Patterson, who I then did talk to about a week later and had a great conversation with him. He was like, this is a great story. You've got a really interesting style. It's very fresh. It's very different than what's out there. And then he said, and parts of it are terrible and you've got to rework them. But ultimately what happened was I ended up working with Patterson's representative, who took the book proposal to all the big New York publishers in the summer of 2019. And it was rejected over and over again. And, the four words that sort of, hit close to the bone were, it's a near miss, almost like a no would be even better. But that near miss, and the fact that I had Patterson's endorsement, said to me, this is something, the publishing industry is really hard. Why don't I self-publish this after it got rejected? Why don't, what's the risk? There's no downside to this. The story's done. I did actually end up rewriting it after I got rejected, because some of these publishers gave me some pretty good, advice and tips, and said, good critiques, saying, this is where you could improve it. This is why we said no. So I took it all to heart, and it became this side hustle, if you will, this passion of mine to see what I could do with it. And I didn't like taking no for an answer. I wanted to see if I could make it successful. So during the process of rewriting the first book and then calling it False Assurances, I was like, well, I have this sequel in mind. Why don't I just write it? And why don't I, do it? Because if I do come out as a self-published author, having two instead of one must be better. Two is bigger than one. So having two products to market to the readers has to be better than having just one. So why not? Again, what's the downside? So I wrote the second book, and then I ended up releasing both of them at the same time in May of 2020, and they took off.
So this is recent meaning you are a recent New York Times. I believe you're a New York Times bestselling author. Is that correct?
No, not New York Times, but Amazon, Wall Street Journal, Apple Books. So New York Times has a what they call a curated list, and oftentimes they don't count ebook volume, and about 2/3 of my sales are ebooks, and the other third are print books. And I actually just came out with an audiobook of the first book called False Assurances, and we'll get the other two audiobooks out over the course of the summer. So number one on Amazon, number one on Wall Street Journal, number one on Apple Books, actually number 1 and 2 on Apple Books at the same time, which is sort of unprecedented for an independent author like me. Which was, again, sort of the risk of writing the second book before even putting the first book out there, could have been an epic waste of time, but it seems to have worked out. So it was,
you brought up, you just brought up something. You said an epic waste of time, and I want to get your thoughts, because I feel like a lot of authors, it's not a waste of time. Even if you sell 0 copies, you are putting your word out there. Is that how you feel when you write your books?
That's a great question. I feel like I have this story to tell, and it's mostly about my protagonist, a guy who's named Ben Porter. And Ben Porter is not like the typical, spy thriller genre male hero. Think Jason Bourne, think James Bond. These cut guys with the 6-pack abs, and they're marksmen. They're good with the ladies and so forth. That seems very stereotypical to me and kind of overplayed. So Ben Porter was my response to that, because I wanted to read a story where an everyday person could be a hero as well. And so he can be anxious at times. He's sort of sarcastic at times, and he's maybe a little bit overweight. Who knows? I actually never really describe him, because I want the reader to kind of imagine what this person looks like and to kind of relate to him, because the Ben Porter parts are written in first person, and then there are also parts of the book that are written with a third person narrator. So you sort of go back and forth, and you see things from two different perspectives. And it's fun to do that, to tell these stories. And I've got a notebook filled with stories that I'd like to tell as I pursue this. So I don't really worry about how many units I sell. I think that I love reading the reviews on Amazon, on Goodreads, and saying, I love this series. We can't wait to see what happens to your character, because people have gotten involved with this fictional hero who they relate to. And I think that's really neat, to be able to create something that somebody else can relate to. And I think that it's worth doing regardless of how many people actually end up reading it.
Now, with your writing style, is this series more designed like you're planning on a trilogy or 5 books, or is it more a James Patterson style where, I mean, whenever I think of James Patterson, I think of like a book series that has, 10, 15, 20 books, and it just kind of keeps coming, and you never know when he's going to stop.
Well, so when I created it, I figured, I would create something that I could keep going, kind of indefinitely. I'll do it as long as it's fun and interesting and people are enjoying it. If I get reviews that say, this is played out, I think I'd take that as serious advice and maybe come up with something new. But I've written 3 books so far. I've got 2 planned, but I see really no reason to end it. I'm writing in real time. So one of the beauties of being independent is that I can come to market very quickly with my product with my stories. In the publishing world, you're looking at 18 to 24 months to get a book from a manuscript to printed. I can do it far, far faster than that. And so, for example, the 3rd book, Subversive Addiction, takes place, during COVID. And it's one of the first books to come out that sort of tackles the topic of the pandemic and how do you weave that into a fictional plot. And that's still very, very fresh, obviously, on everybody's minds. So, by just sort of keeping up with the times, I figure if I wrote a book a year, for example, that would be a pretty cool thing to do and keep it all current.
Going back to the bestseller list, so you said you were on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. Did you end up selling the rights to your book, or can self-published authors make the Wall Street Journal bestseller list and the other lists as well?
No, I own the rights to the stories. So yeah, a self-published book can be on those lists. So again, the New York Times list is curated, so they eliminate some components of it, and they tell you that it is, it's their list. They can do whatever they want with it, but the other lists are more on volume. And so that's why I reflected on those lists.
Well, I'm assuming because you've done so well, have major publishers come to you saying, hey, we want to buy the rights?
No, they haven't. And
that's
I don't know whether it's a little surprising. I was sort of had this, one of those sort of daydreams. You're like, they're going to come back out of the woodwork. All the people who rejected me are to come back with their tail between their legs and say, we made a mistake. Will you come back? And no, that hasn't happened. I don't know if that's an ego-driven decision or a decision that they say, well, it's played out now. There's no reason to come back and do it again. But to be honest, I love the independence of being independent and being self-published. You'd have to come up with a pretty good deal to come to me and say, we want to take over and we want to market the series. So that said, a Hollywood producer has bought the film rights for the series, which is also incredibly cool for an independent author like me to know that there's a potential movie deal in the works and a movie being made.
Well, that answer that was going to be my next question. That your books seem like they would be ripe for motion picture, for the big screen. So Hollywood company, a lot of these Hollywood companies are huge, Disney, MGM, and they own book publishing arms. They have small book publishers. So that's great that you were able to sell the rights to a Hollywood company. When can we expect the movie to come out? And are you going to be helping out with the screenwriting?
So I wish I knew when. So the project, it's a film option, which means it's not a guaranteed, they call it a green lit project in the business. And I'm learning a little bit about movie business as I go through this. So it has not been green lit for production yet. The studio has engaged a screenwriter. They tell me I can't say who that is because it's their screenwriter, but that step has been taken. I've been working closely with them to work on how do you adapt a 400-page or 350-page book to 90 minutes to 2 hours of screen time, which obviously means you've got to make some significant changes in the story. So I'm part of the process, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. I wish I had a date and an announcement that, yes, we're going to make a movie out of it, but I don't quite have that yet. I remain very, very hopeful that's going to happen because it's very fast paced. It definitely will make, I think, a very fun movie.
Well, I think that's great that you got rejected and that you self-published yourself, because you're probably making more money in this Hollywood deal, especially if it does hit the big screen. You'd probably make more money since they came directly to you than having some large middleman like Random House who's going to take the bulk of the money. But on top of that, just to let our listeners know, look, Christopher is not some random self-published author. You look up his books on Amazon: Threat Bias, Ben Porter Series 2, Ben Porter Series 1, that's called False Assurances, and even the new book, Subversive Addiction, that's book 3. And his books, just look at the ranking. It's currently ranked extremely, extremely high. You have reviews in the thousands. It's difficult to get even 100 reviews. Like, that's an accomplishment to get 100 reviews, but your books all have more than 1,500 reviews. Your latest one already has more than 100 reviews, and it just came out recently. So you do extremely, extremely well. Your top fiction is a difficult category to be in, whether it's Wall Street Journal, Amazon. It's very, very difficult, much more difficult than what I write in, which is business nonfiction. That's actually one of the easier categories because there aren't as many books coming out in that space. But you do really well, and it just surprises me that despite how well you've done, despite the movie deal, the big publishers haven't come knocking saying, hey, you know what, we made a mistake, let's go ahead and buy out the rights.
Yeah, it is what it is, and I'm happy to continue on this independent path. And I've got my it's funny, my ego, if you will, is not stroked by a number one sales status. It's really about the reader reviews, and you're right. I've got thousands of reviews on Amazon and Goodreads and Apple collectively. I've never actually tallied them up. Maybe I should someday. But I love those reader reviews that they, the 5-star, 4-star reviews, which, I think I have a 4.7 or something is my average on Amazon right now. That's really gratifying. And to make that connection with readers is awesome. I think one of the biggest surprise I've had during this journey is the people who reach out to me and say they've read the book, and we get in touch and we start a correspondence on email or on social media. I haven't really figured out how to use social media yet, so I have a tiny, tiny footprint. And again, it's a growth opportunity for me right there to get my name out and to build the sort of name recognition. But that connection with readers, you just don't have that with the big publishers because there are too many middlemen. There are too many people involved in the process, and you feel kind of distant. I feel really connected with the readers of these stories because of those reviews and because I try to remain as accessible as possible. And that's really it's really heartwarming to have that kind of personal connection to somebody as you share these stories.
Yeah, I love that you're self-publishing. We've done at least one, if not multiple episodes on, how to self-publish books. But you actually, the launch of Subversive Addiction, you actually wrote a blog post about how not to launch a book. Can you talk a little bit about some of the mistakes you made going in and launching this last book?
Yeah, it was a total disaster. There's no other way to put it.
It might have been a total disaster, but it's worked out fairly well.
Yeah, it's getting there. I mean, I missed opportunity on that. That's why it was a disaster. So Subversive, I worked with this production company that helped me do the layouts and the ebook formatting and that sort of thing. And just because I didn't know how to do it, and I've since actually learned how to do it because I want to control it myself. I want to be able to do this the way I want to do it. So unfortunately, when they uploaded Subversive Addiction to Amazon, they were supposed to push the button to make it a proof version, so I could actually get a proof and see what it looked like. But they clicked the wrong button, and you can't undo that click. And they put it on sale. So the book. Somebody calls me and they're like, "I just bought your book," and I'm like, "Which one?" And they said, "Book 3." I said, "That's impossible. It's not out yet." They're like, "Well, but I have it. It's like in my hands." Like, are you kidding? I had no idea that this had happened in the background. So that was a bit of a struggle because the ebook was not out. It was not out on all the other platforms. It was not in Apple. It was not on Kobo. It wasn't in Barnes & Noble. And so you sort of miss the new release algorithm boost that you would get from something like that. So that was kind of a bummer that it did sort of that opportunity passed me by, because then it took like another 6 weeks to finish the distribution setup, and took another 2 weeks to finish the ebook formatting. So it was a bit of a problem, and lesson learned. Now I know how to fix that for the next one, and the next one now I've figured out how to do a pre-order and so forth. So you learn from adversity, and you just kind of shake it off and move forward. And I'll do better the next time. But yeah, it was a disaster.
That's funny. But as far as your background in marketing goes, because as Adam said, we've done a couple of episodes on self-publishing, and it's really all about the marketing. So, and you're in the fiction space. When you came out with your first two books at the same time, did you just put it up on Amazon, on the internet, and people found it and it just became viral? Kind of like 50 Shades of Grey, because I don't know if you followed that author's, James, E.L. James, her story, but she tried to go the traditional publishing route, got rejected everywhere, and just self-published it, and it went viral on these online, like, women's fiction message boards, like BDSM message boards. It went viral there, and I believe that's the highest grossing franchise this millennium, more than Harry Potter. They've made over $1 billion in franchise sales if you include the products that they sell, because they came out with products and gifts, and then the books, obviously, and then the 3 movies that came out and everything associated with that franchise. So in your case, how did you market it? Did you have some kind of fiction espionage message boards that you were going to, or it just caught on because of pure luck?
It was pure luck, and then one transformational event, which was, and I ask you, set your politics aside because it's not a political story, but one of James Patterson's golfing buddies, a guy named Rush Limbaugh, got his hands on the early book, and Rush, they played golf together, and then Rush Limbaugh talked about False Assurances, the first book on air. That helped. I mean, it was 3 minutes on air, and boom, it took off. And so that's really what set it up for that summer's success. This would have been last summer when I was number one. Actually, the New York Times did a story on how a bestseller is a bestseller because it's a bestseller, very repetitive, but that success begets success. And so once you crack the top of those lists, you can stay there, because then you can just keep feeding the machine and keep the algorithms delivering that recommendation to people who are purchasing books. So that was really the transformational event, and it was luck. I mean, there was no skill involved. It was definitely just luck. Now it's down to the grindstone, because it's about building the franchise, building the name recognition, and staying at it. But obviously, that gave me a toehold that is super critical, and you need that little bit of help, I think, to succeed in this stuff.
Well, I'll tell you, with regard to Rush Limbaugh or any major media personality, you get that one tweet or that one, you said, 3-minute mention. Did you even know that James Patterson told him about your book and that Rush Limbaugh was reading your book? Did you have any idea about that?
I had no idea, and I got a call from somebody who was listening to the show, and he said, "You're on the air, tune in." And I found the live feed on the internet, and I tuned in, a few minutes late to like a minute and a half late of the 3-minute storyline, and then there was eventually a transcript that showed up, so I could read the whole thing. But yeah, I had no idea it was going to happen.
Well, I know people who spend tens of thousands of dollars on publicists, PR people, and you didn't spend a dime for that. I think that 3-minute segment that will generate over $1 million of sales for you, because once you get over that hump, and I've seen this with one of my books, my first book, Podcastnomics. I got over the hump because of a mention in a blog, like a popular blog, and then people just started buying my book, and the Amazon algorithms switched on and were like, "All right, we need to start promoting this book." And I was selling, not your level, but I was selling hundreds of copies a month without doing anything, no publicist, no nothing, because I had that one light switch, and you or not that one hill that you overcame, and that I overcame. But in your case, your hill was much bigger, and you get Rush Limbaugh on board, and boom. I mean, that's a lot of people. That's a lot more than my hundreds of people buying the book. And then on top of that, Amazon has their algorithm, which we've talked about on previous episodes. And once they see that you reach a certain review point, that you reach a certain amount of sales, they're just going to push it out for you free of charge. So you probably don't ever have to market your books moving forward because you've made it.
Well, I don't say I've made it. It's a nice compliment. Thank you very much. But no, I don't think that the journey up is ever done. I actually love the challenge of climbing the hill, and there's made it is very, very subjective. I don't have any goal in mind. I want to be able to reach readers and tell the story and have people engage in reading, which I think is less and less common, unfortunately. I think that the way I write is I write very short chapters. It's very fast paced. It's, we keep things going. It's kind of maybe, writing for the Instagram or Snapchat generation, who knows? But it's still fun to tell stories, and it's still important to have that content creation and in a written word, because it's when you get lost in a book, anyone who's ever read a book and gets lost in that book, in that storyline, it's a very human experience, and that's what I really enjoy doing, and I hope to be able to keep doing it. So, have I made it? No, because I can always do better. And in fact, even as I look at the way I write, as I'm writing the fourth book, the lessons I've learned just writing 3 so far, I could be a better writer too. So I don't think it's a journey that ever ends, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I think it's a great challenge, an ongoing challenge to kind of do better and do better and do better.
So let's talk about your writing style. Do you like set aside specific hours for it? Do you just write whenever you kind of feel like it, maybe 1 or 2 hours a day? Kind of, do you lock yourself in a room? Do you stay out in the open? Kind of, what's your writing process?
So currently, because I still have a day job, I still work in design, and so I still run a separate company on this, at the same time. That is still a focus for me. It's a creative outlet as well, and it's a good business because it's been around for a long time. Hopefully a good reputation locally for doing good work. And it seems to be, I don't actually advertise. It's all word of mouth based. I don't even have an Instagram account because it's just like, my business in the design side is 100% word of mouth. So the answer is, when I see a sort of a downtime coming up in the design business, or I schedule downtime, then I will set aside big chunks of time to write, because I figure I'm a better writer when I sit down and say, all right, here's my goal. I'm going to write, this chunk of book or this chunk of synopsis or whatever. But I'm always thinking about it. I'm always taking, I'll be driving in the car and I'll take voice memos and, talk to myself, on my phone to say, this is what I'm thinking about, or I have a notebook almost always with me as I write down ideas or character descriptions and that sort of thing. So then when the time comes, it's a mass marathon to get the thing just out as fast as I can. I think I wrote the manuscript for Subversive Addiction, the third book, in maybe 6 weeks, working pretty much full time on it, still doing a little bit of design work on the side, but I wanted to do it all at once. And then I put it away for a little while and step away from it and give myself some distance, and then go back and edit it and, probably rewrite 2/3 of it. So that's the process as it stands now. Who knows whether that'll be the process in the future, but it seems to be working. And that's probably how I'll do book 4 and maybe book 5 as well.
First off, let's talk a little bit about your family life, because I read that you do have children. How many children do you have? And because, look, a lot of our listeners, they're listening right now. They're at home, and maybe they got, in my case, I have he's not a newborn, but he's a 1.5 years son. And you probably remember the first few years when you had children. It's especially the first child, the challenge that you're facing. And then you're running a business as well, the construction design company. And then you're writing, and then you're likely married and have a wife who you need to tend to as well.
Maybe sleep every once in a while.
Yeah, maybe sleep once in a while, maybe grab a few meals in between. How do you find the time to do all this? And was there a period in your life, maybe after your last child started going to kindergarten, where time just opened up and you were like, all right, I can write that best-selling book that I've always wanted to write?
Well, I think it's a conscious choice of finding that work-life balance and that work-life family balance as well. So I have three kids. One is a freshman in college, and then I've got one in high school and one in middle school. So pretty good range of ages. And yeah, it's really hard to find the time and the balance to make sure everything's happy and everybody's satisfied, and meanwhile can take care of the business as well. So, the writing was not possible for me until I scaled back the construction business. So when I first started writing book one, I remember it distinctly. It was a night in October of 2017. I was at my construction office. There's a pile of paperwork on my desk, change orders and purchase orders, and I've got to write this proposal. I've got to do this detailed drawing, and I just said, I need a break. I need to do something different. So I started writing this story that had come to me earlier in the year, and I wrote, maybe a couple of pages, and I went on the internet, of course, and I Googled it. How long is the average novel? And it's between 80 and 100,000 words. So, and I'd written maybe 350. So I'm like, whoa, that is a steep hill to climb. And so I wrote a little bit that fall, and I set it aside. I'd written maybe 15,000 words of the first book. And it wasn't until I had closed the construction company that I found the time to write in between all that other stuff. So yeah, it definitely becomes easier the older your kids get, but the problems that your kids face also become a little more daunting as well as you get into the social life of teenagers and the impact of social media on teenagers. I could go on and on and on. In fact, Subversive Addiction was inspired by the impact that social media had on one of my kids, and the addictive quality of social media. So, finding that balance is tough. It's an ongoing process. There's no one answer, and it changes. I mean, it changes from year to year, depending on what challenges your family is going through, your kids are going through, your spouse is going through. My view is I try to be as adaptable as possible and not get too hung up on a routine and do what I can to make everything work. I have a lot of energy, so that helps as well.
You said you have a lot of energy. What do you do? Is there a routine that you do daily or something you drink to give you all that energy?
No, not really. I get up, I have my coffee, and I get up early. That actually is part of the routine. I guess that is, come to think of it, it's restorative. I get up before anyone else does. I have my coffee, and now I'm in Connecticut, so this time of year it's beautiful weather outside, so I can maybe sit outside for a few minutes and enjoy nothing. I don't pick up my phone until after I have breakfast. I don't look at messages. And I put my phone away after dinner, and if somebody wants to get in touch with me, it can wait till the next day. I'm pretty good about that, and not being caught up in that vicious cycle of always being in touch with the outside world. But no, my energy comes from just this. This is a huge adventure, this opportunity, this gift I've been given to have this stuff that I've written be so well received by so many people. Now I want to deliver for them. I mean, the pressure I feel to write an even better fourth book over the first three, which, as you said, have gotten a ton of good reviews. That's pressure I'm putting on myself, but I really love that challenge, and I can't wait to take it on. So I think that's what keeps me going, is this idea of you can always learn from your past and build on it. And if you're not doing that, what else is there? I think that's what keeps me going. There's no magic elixir.
And then as far as writing fiction, because I would consider you a businessman and a designer, but did you ever consider writing nonfiction? And how did you get that fiction bug? Did you just grow up reading a lot of fiction and writing, maybe in college, taking a lot of English classes?
Yeah, no, I remember reading Tom Clancy's The Hunt for Red October, which was the seminal book on the techno thriller. And I think I was in high school. And I loved it. I loved the whole concept of this, the international intrigue and the maritime warfare, and this technological achievement of this submarine powered by a whole different drive system, I just was captured by that. It was just so neat to me. So I've always been a fiction reader. And when it came time to, when I thought about this story, I kind of did start writing in kind of a Tom Clancy-esque style where, there is a little bit of technology, and all three of the books have a fairly strong technology bent to them. But I don't try to make it too complicated. I try to make it, I don't want it like, as we talked about with my editor, Tom Clancy was like, you'd read like the owner's manual for the submarine. I just want you to feel like you're on the submarine. You don't need to learn how to drive it. So that's what I feel like writing is that kind of fun fiction, which is light enough not to be daunting. It's never going to be taught in a high school English class, for example, but it's fun to consume. It's fun to read. It's fun to keep you attached to the page and turning pages. But no. Short answer to your question is I haven't really thought about writing nonfiction. I probably could. I'd be, I could write a whole book on the construction business, for example, and the do's, the don'ts of all the lessons I've learned for doing that for 26 years or whatever it's been. But maybe that's a good idea. Kind of intrigued by it, actually.
Awesome. Well, we've had Christopher Rosow on the show. He's the Wall Street Journal, Amazon best-selling author, #1 best-selling author of the Ben Porter series. All 3 books have reached bestseller status. He's got, hopefully, a movie coming out, already sold the rights to major Hollywood producers. His website is ChristopherRosow.com. That's ROSOW, ChristopherRosow.com. Christopher, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners or anything else you want to promote?
I don't want to promote anything other than your show and the opportunity to be on it. The idea of marketing and getting the word out is an ongoing task. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity to talk to you guys and to talk to your listeners. That's the stories that we all have to tell each other about our collective experiences. These are all terrific stories to listen to. I want to hear your stories as well. So, that exchange of ideas, that exchange of stories is fantastic. I will say one last little plug, though, for the first audiobook that I released, which might be interesting, is I did an ensemble recording of an audiobook, which nobody does as an independent writer. So I had 7 voice actors play it, and I did it because I could. And because nobody else did it. And why not? And so that was an incredibly fun project to do, to actually listen to these different characters or these different actors play the different parts in the story. We have an opportunity to do new stuff, and don't ever let somebody tell you, no, you can't do it, because you can. And I think I'm sort of proof of that. And I can't wait to keep doing it.
As much as I read and am involved in the publishing industry, for some reason, I've never heard of an ensemble audiobook. So that kudos to you for making that leap, thinking of that idea. And I've thought about it before where I'm like, oh, I don't know who's talking because it's the same person talking. And, you're having one guy be every character. So even in nonfiction, you're having one guy. There might be times when another character comes in. So props to you for that. I want to check out that book.
Yeah,
now.
please do. You can get it. You can get a free, the 5-minute sample on Audible, on Amazon, or on Apple. And there's a few different voices. I wish I could have had a different voice actor play every different part, because there's probably 40 voices, but that was just obviously unachievable for someone like me, because it just would have been way too daunting. But this is still a cool approach. Like, the male voices are male, the female voices are female. Why not? I mean, it's so check out the free sample, and if you enjoy it, maybe it's a whole new way to do these things. Who knows?
Great. Well, this has been a fantastic interview. We really appreciate you coming on our show, Christopher Rosow. Again, ChristopherRosow.com. To all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. Leave us a review. Check us out on all social media. If you have any questions, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's our email address, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. And until next week, keep on working from home.